get started here in about 2 minutes. All right, if you want to turn over in your Bibles to Job chapter 27, and we're going to study from there this morning. I have prepared to be able to study and teach through chapter 31 this morning, but I am reluctant to say that we'll get all the way through that. It's a lot more material probably than just one class, and so we probably will spill over into the next week. But it does kind of wind down these last few chapters that we'll look at right now. It does kind of wind down what Job has to say. His friends have spoken, just about all of them. There's still one left. Elihu will start in chapter 32. But Job kind of is winding down his final words. And that's what we'll be kind of studying this week and then probably next week as well. what's interesting about this last cycle, I think I mentioned this last time, all three of the friends have spoken before in the other cycles. But in this third cycle of friends, Job speaking, this dialogue between each other, Zophar does not speak. Job replies to Bildad, and so Job takes this opportunity then to speak to all three of his friends who've come to spend time with him after he's really been suffering, and he's lost his family, he's lost his wealth, he's lost his health. And he no longer responds to each one as he's kind of done in the past. There was one instance earlier where he kind of spoke to all of them, but for the most part he's spoken to each individual friend after the friend has given some kind of a speech. But with this one, he just responds, and he responds to all of them as a group in these final words. Now, I really like this section. This is one of my most favorite sections of this book because you really get to see the heart of Job. And he starts to make a transition, and we'll notice this. He starts making this transition from being in this theological crisis to being in a spiritual crisis. And we'll see that specifically when, after God speaks to him, and Job responds, then he goes through that spiritual crisis. But right now we've been talking a lot about the theological crisis, the idea he's trying to figure out, how does God respond to those that are suffering who are innocent? That's the big question. Job is innocent, but yet he's had to deal with all these terrible, terrible things. And in their mind at that time, they thought that if you were good, then you got good things. If you were bad, then bad things happened to you. And so with this dilemma of these bad things happening to Job, and he can't figure out exactly what he's done wrong, that's a theological crisis. He dealt with the physical crisis when he lost everything, and now the theological crisis of the question of why. And then we'll see this transition into the spiritual crisis. All three of these crises we deal with in some time or another in our lives, I think. I think we do. That's why this book is so good for us. Right here in the middle of hopefully, maybe. Can we just say maybe the end of a pandemic? It's the end of the year. Can we just say that maybe we're getting close? Well, I'm going to. We hope. Well, it's been good for us. How does Job manage this crisis that he's dealing with? And how do we manage it as well? Well, Job gives these final words. And he begins in chapter 27 and defends his innocence. And he's got three main points in this text. Three main points in this text. He says that I am innocent and full of integrity. I'm innocent and I'm full of integrity. I've not done anything wrong. And so he's committed to the truth. If I've not done anything wrong, I'm committing to that. No matter what God does to me, I will not sin. No matter how I'm going to have to suffer, I'm going to try my very best to not sin. Just in the same way that he's done in the past. Boy, I wish that's a good lesson for me. No matter what happens to me, Lord, in my life, no matter what things are taken away from me, no matter what kind of illness that I have to suffer with, I'm going to do my very best not to sin. Now, when everything is going good, I struggle with not sinning. Do you? Am I the only one? I doubt it. And when things go bad, we sin just as well. Well, Job is committed. And he says, I'm innocent, but I'm going to try my very best to stay full of integrity and not sin. Another main point in this text is he says, I'll never admit that you, my friends, and your arguments are right. I'm not giving in to that. You don't have a leg to stand on, and I'm not going to give in to what you have to say. the final point that Job has is that he says, my conscience is clear. I'm good with it in my mind. My conscience is clear. And we'll see that as we go through the text in chapter 27. Let's look at it. Starting in verse 1, we'll look and read verses 1 through 4 first. It says, Then Job continued his discourse and said, As God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty who has embittered my soul, for as long as life is in me, and the breath of God is in my nostrils, my lips certainly will not speak unjustly, nor will my tongue mutter deceit. So it starts off with this, then Job continued his discourse, or, moreover, here he continues on. And it seems like what I said earlier, he's waited for all of his friends to reply. And after all, it was Zophar's turn, if we go by the pattern that has been throughout the earlier in this book. It was Zophar's turn, the old goat. I think I've mentioned that every class. I've tried to anyway. Mention that Zophar was a goat. But they were silent. I don't know if they were silent because of weariness or out of frustration. Maybe when you've argued so much with a friend or at least tried to convince your friend, there comes a point where you're like, listen, I have no more to say. I've said everything I can. Now I'm giving you the silent treatment. Maybe they're just worn out. That's kind of the way I feel about it, maybe. They're worn out from it. They just keep going back and forth, and they're just tired. They're tired of what Job has to say. They're tired of trying to come up with answers and it not be sufficient for Job in his mind. And so Job continued. Job kept going in his discourse. And it's not like the friends have lost this debate. Rather, what they have lost is maybe all patience with Job. And so they've given up on him. And from now on, their only argument will be the argument of that silence. You think about, maybe you just throw your hands up in the air. Forget it. Forget it. I'm done with you. I have no more to say. What can you do with this man? I just figure them saying, what can we do with this man who's so bullheaded, so hard-headed? We just can't satisfy him in his answer. And so Job continued with his discourse. And he says, As God lives, who has taken away my right. And this is not like, it's important to understand what this word right means. It's the idea of justice. He's taken away his justice. He's tried to figure this out. And in the previous chapter, Job praised the power of God. And, in the same way that his friends did, they talked about how God is so almighty and so powerful. And Job does the same thing. He praises God's power, but he also recognizes that he needed something more than just the might of God. He needed to understand a little bit more. And so as God lives, and he describes him who has taken away the justice. It just doesn't make any sense. He needed to be rescued. And Job feels like he needs to be rescued even from God, to truly have this justice. He says he's made my soul bitter. Now the thing about this comparison, the comparison of the Almighty and the one who has embittered my soul. Think about it for just a minute. He is so almighty, but yet he has embittered my soul. What an awkward, ironic comparison. The one who's almighty, but embitters my soul. And even as Job confesses his faith in the living God, he's very matter-of-factly accuses God of deserting him. leaving him in a lurch. And he doesn't say, as I live, but he says, as God lives. Even though God has hidden his face and denied him justice, he still recognizes God as the Almighty and the most powerful, as God lives. He felt God had denied him justice, but still inconsistently knew that somehow God was just. God was right. And so he figured he could swear by his name, as God lives, who has taken away my right or my justice. And that's an interesting way of putting things. The Almighty who has embittered my soul. And then he says, as long as life is in me. Now, as long as I live, and the breath of God is in my nostrils. I love that phrase right there. It takes me right back to the very beginning of time when God breathed breath of life into the nostrils of Adam. And Job says, as long as I live, as long as life is in me, and as long as the breath of God is, not my breath is in my nostrils, he still is giving credit to God, as God has put this life in my body. My lips certainly will not speak unjustly, nor will my tongue mutter deceit. In his bold and plain-spoken manner, to this point, one might think that Job has spoken wickedness before God and his friends, but yet Job did not. And Job did not think he had. And he insisted that he would not. I will not do it. All this turmoil, you think, finally, maybe there's just a day, maybe there's just a time where Job in the past has said something bad about God. Maybe after the second child dies. Maybe after he lost, a few hundred camels. Maybe in his mind and in his thoughts, maybe he said something, but no. And he says, I will not. I will not do it. My lips certainly will not speak unjustly, nor my tongue mutter deceit. I wish that all of us could learn this lesson. I wish I could, because I know of times in my life, and maybe in times of your life as well, where you and I have both, in times of distress and hurt and crisis, we start thinking and saying things that blame God for those terrible things. And we start pointing fingers at Him and His church. And that is not right. As long as I live, I'm not going to speak unjustly about God and what He's done. As long as I live, I'm not going to speak unjustly about the church and the kingdom. I'm not going to let that be in my mouth that I speak wrongly about God's people. I can't do it. Boy, I wish we'd all learned this lesson. We need to be careful about that. Let's not speak. And in times of crisis, if there's ever a time that we speak great about the church and great about God's kingdom and great about God and what He's done, this is it. This is our opportunity to really show the world what we're all about. Show them that our focus is on Jesus and His kingdom. And I'm not going to say anything bad about the church. I'm not going to say anything bad about God. I may be in the worst time of my life, but I'm not going to speak No deceit will be in my tongue. Man, what a good lesson from Job. I can learn a lot from Job right here, just in these first few verses. Any questions or comments right here with verses 1 through 4, chapter 27? It's good stuff, isn't it? All right, let's keep reading a little bit. Verse 5. Another real quick one right here. As far be it from me that I should declare you right. He's talking to his friends here. I'm not going to tell you, my friends, I'm not going to tell you that you've done what's right. And I'm not going to tell you that what you're saying is right. Far be it from me. that I would give in to you. You know, a lot of times when you're arguing with somebody, you know, and maybe you've just got confrontation. You know, eventually you have to say, you know what, maybe, and hopefully in your own mind say, maybe they're right. And you start self-reflecting and thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong, they're right, and I need to give in. Maybe there's just a little bit. Maybe I could concede just some. Job says, far be it from me that I should declare that you're right. I'm not going to give in to what you're having to say. Not at all. And honestly, I think in my mind, you know, that's a kind of a bad quality to have when you're maybe having confrontation with somebody. A bad quality is to not concede at all. Not give. Surely there's something when you're having an argument with your friends about whatever. There's something that you could give in on. There's some compromise. There's some room. But Job says, far be it from me that I should declare you right. He's not moving. And rightfully so, Job shouldn't move. Job shouldn't move. I'm not going to waver one bit. And so you have to remember he's talking theologically here. He's talking about his why he's having to suffer, and even though he's innocent. And you think even theologically in our mind, we don't need to give in at all either. There is no, doctrinally, there is no room to waver. Far be it from me that I should declare that you're right. When doctrine says this is it. Now, matters of opinion, sure, I can concede, we can give, and we can take. But when it comes to doctrine, far be it from me that I should declare that you're right. And Job is dealing with that. The doctrine of retribution, of how he would suffer even though he's innocent. He says, I'm not going to give in with this. It doesn't make any sense for me to have to suffer since I'm innocent. Now, verse 6. He says, I've kept hold of my righteousness and I will not let it go. These are bold statements. I wanted to separate these out just a little bit. Bold statements. I've kept hold of my righteousness and I will not let it go. No skin off of my back. I'm innocent, is what he says. And I have a clear mind on the matter. I've held on to what is right. And I'm not letting it go at all. I will stay faithful even up to the point of my death. No skin off my back. You know, I'm not going to give in to you guys. You've said your thing. I'm not going to give in. I've held on to my righteousness and I will not let it go. I love this section. It's almost like Job is just digging his heels in right here with his friends. Yes, sir. Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, he will not let it go. He will be faithful. Yeah, that's exactly right. Gary's saying that this is exactly the way that God described Job to Satan. He's not going to give up. He's going to hold on to his righteousness. He'll be faithful, even if everything is taken away from him. And Job is saying that same thing. Good. I forgot to advance this one here just a couple of times. Move on. Okay, so now let's look at chapter 27, verses 7 through 12. And first start with verses 7 through 10. Here Job describes the vain hope of the hypocrite, or those who are wicked, or the ungodly is another way of, I think it actually describes it in my text as the ungodly, or no, it says the wicked man. verse 13. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. Or the wicked. Yeah, there it is, verse 7 too. So he describes the vain hope of the hypocrite. This is Job's way of assuring his friends that he's well aware of how God deals with the wicked. Listen, I know how God handles those who are ungodly. I know how God handles those who are wicked. The friends have continually been saying to him, you know, Job, God punishes the wicked, and you have been punished, and therefore you must be guilty of something. That's what they've been telling him. You know, Job, this is what happens to those who are bad. My mother used to say, when I was a kid and maybe I was horsing around and doing something I shouldn't have and get hurt, and my mother would say, well, that's what happens to bad boys. We still say that to our kids too. And that's true in some respect. If you horse around and if you are messing around with something, I don't know, and you get hurt, you know, that's what's going to, if you're not where you're supposed to be and you get hurt, well, if you were where you were supposed to be, I would have been able to keep you safe. That's the mentality there. You know, Job, God punishes the wicked, and look, obviously you've been punished, so therefore you must have been a bad boy. You've been guilty of something in your life. This argument assumes that he doesn't believe God's ways with the sinners, but Job does believe that God punishes the wicked. He does believe that. In other words, just because he holds to his innocence does not mean that he is not aware of how God deals with the guilty. You know, he understands that. At least he thinks that he understands that. You know, that was the teaching of the day. And Job knew that. But he's thinking, this just doesn't make sense, though, because I've not done anything wrong. That's why it's a theological crisis. All right, let's look at the text. Let's look at the text. All right, he says, may my enemy be as the wicked and my opponent as the unjust. For what is the hope of the godless when he is cut off, when God requires his life? Will God hear his cry when his distresses come upon him? Will he take delight in the Almighty? Will he call on God at all times? This phrase, may my enemy be as the wicked. Here Job, in rather strong terms, is asking for the same punishment his friends think that he deserves. And he wants that to be put upon their own heads because of their false accusations. May my enemy be as the wicked. And so, you know, he wants his friends to have to, you know, they need to suffer just because they've been accusing me about, they've spoke all kinds of false things. And if that's false, if those are false things, and that's wicked to speak false things, and the wicked are punished, then my friends should be punished. May my enemy be as the wicked. And then he says, and my opponent as the unjust. This phrase, for what is the hope of the godless when he's cut off? What is the hope of the godless? This is the word hypocrite. There's a lot of words here. If you notice this, there's wicked, opponent, enemy, godless. You know, all these things are perfect descriptions of those that are not following God's ways. Here, this word godless is this word hypocrite. We understand this word. It's a New Testament word even. Jesus uses this when he's talking to the scribes and the Pharisees especially. He calls them hypocrites, brood of vipers. They're godless. And Job was accused by his friends of being hypocrite. Being a hypocrite and of clinging to hidden sin instead of just confessing and repenting. He just If he would just confess and repent, we could move on from this. And here Job agreed that that the hope of the hypocrite was vain. It's worthless. The hope of the hypocrite, the hope of the godless when he's cut off. It's vain. It's worthless. He says, will God hear his cry? Will he call on God? And here it is. I love this right here. At all times. At all times. Well, see, the hypocrite doesn't. At all times. The hypocrite says that he does, acts like he does, but he doesn't. The hypocrite says, yeah, I read my Bible every day. And I'm going, in front of everybody else, I'm going to act like I read my Bible every day. But the hypocrite, the godless, does not do that. It's not at all times. Well, and if you think about it, we all struggle with that just a little bit, don't we? At times, I say and I do what I think I'm supposed to do, and I don't really measure up to what really God is expecting of me. Yeah, I pray. I have my heart right, but he doesn't. Will the godless, will the wicked, will the hypocrite call on God at all times? No. No. Job was really in a difficult situation with his friends. He agreed that God did not hear the cry of the hypocrite, but he had to endure his own season of silence from God. He hasn't heard anything from God. Not yet. And he's wanting it. Remember, just not a few chapters back, he's crying out, wanting an audience with God. And he's not heard anything just yet. Job could comfort himself in the understanding that he did in fact call on God, but the hypocrite wouldn't do that. Wouldn't do that. Will he call on God at all times? All right, any questions or comments about verses 7 through 10? See, I told you I've studied all the way up to chapter 31, but I don't think we can get there. It's just too good. This part is. It's really good stuff. All right, let's look at verses 11 and 12. 11 and 12. He says, I will instruct you in the power of God. What is with the Almighty I will not conceal. Behold, all of you have seen it. Why then do you act foolishly? I love this. He says, I will instruct you in the power of God. I've got something to teach you. I'm going to teach you about the hand of God. Everybody get seated. I'm now the teacher. Job is deeply frustrated because his friends just are lacking so much understanding not just about the way that God deals with things and why this is going on. I think he's frustrated with his friends because they just don't really understand what he's going through and what he has gone through. And so he's frustrated. Those friends, they knew certain principles about God and his way in the world, but they misapplied those principles to Job's situation. They were just off. And so he says, I'll instruct you, I'll tell you. I will not conceal it, I'll not hide it any longer. You've seen it. Have you not seen it? Don't you know? You've all seen it. Then why do you act this way? You know what we say to our kids? Don't you know better? You should know better. You're 10 years old. Why are you acting like you're 5 years old? You're 13 years old. Why are you acting like you're 10 years old? Well, Job says, why are you acting so foolishly? You know the answers. Why do you behave with such complete nonsense? Job's friends claim to know God and his ways, yet they analyze Job's crisis in an illogical way. It's just not logical. It's illogical. And so he summons all the strength of his faith, and he declared that he would teach his opponents. He'd teach his friends, these enemies of his, frenemies is what they are in Job, concerning the hand of God, the power of God, and now practically took hold of all that he had said about God's wisdom, or God's visitation on the wicked and how God handles that, and he hurled it back on them as a condemnation. Why do you act so foolishly? You know better. You know better. Okay. Any questions or anything about chapter 27? All right. Let's go to chapter 28. I've got about 10 minutes, and I think we can do this in 10. Okay, so Job continues his speech in chapter 28 with a praise to godly wisdom, with his point being that man cannot answer the ultimate questions for this kind of wisdom. It's the prerogative of God. God can do this. This may be his own conclusion to the dilemma. This may be what Job has finally come up with. That he's facing this question, does God punish the innocent? And his answer, however, it seems to be, some questions only God has the wisdom to answer. Well, we say that. God only knows. I can't figure this out. I don't know the answer to this. God knows it. God knows what to do. We have to trust in him. His friends, they thought they were wise. And they could not really come up with a good answer. Didn't make sense. And so Job declares that only God has true wisdom, which is the understanding of how all things work together. Just knowledge, and there's a difference between just knowing things and wisdom. Wisdom is being able to take what you know and applying it into your life, applying it into a situation. God knows how to do that. We can know a lot of things, but wisdom is deep, a lot deeper. And that true wisdom, that's what God knows. And God is able to apply that true wisdom to every situation, and certainly to Job's situation. All right, let's look at chapter 28. Let's go down to verse 12 through 15. It kind of helps us summarize what Job is saying here in this chapter. He says, "But where can wisdom be found? Is the place of understanding. Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me, and the sea says, it is not with me. Pure gold cannot be given in exchange for it, nor can silver be weighed at its price." All right, so I love this right here. He said, where can wisdom be found? And here Job makes the point that he's built this up in the previous verses. Men search hard and are willing to endure danger for the sake of riches of the earth. All of that is easily compared to the search for wisdom. You got to search hard for this, and men will risk their lives to find it. I think about anytime I travel out west, Kira grew up in Colorado, and we've gone out there several times. And you're driving through Kansas, and Kansas is just so flat, and it's just ridiculous. The best thing about Kansas is seeing it in your rearview mirror. It really is. Now, my mother-in-law is from there. Kira's family is from Hutch, and Rachel was born in Hutch. But listen, it has nothing to do with that. But when you're going through Kansas, and you look over some of those little ridges, I remember my grandfather telling me when we were driving out there for the first time, he says, Alex, can you imagine traveling through Kansas and into Colorado on a wagon with horses and your whole family? And then over that ridge, you see not one or two Indians, but a group of them. And so we would pause for just a moment as we're driving 70 miles an hour down I-70 and just think about those Indians on the ridge. They're all going out there because, riches, a new life out west. There was the gold rush in Colorado. There was a silver rush in Colorado. Everybody's going out there. Then the gold rush in California. Can you imagine traveling over the Rocky Mountains? If you've ever been there, you would understand how difficult that is. Well, that's a tough thing. Men go all over looking for riches. But wisdom is the greatest treasure of all. Pure gold can be given in exchange for it. Silver can't be weighed for the price of silver, or for the price of wisdom. But we go to lengths to find gold and silver, but wisdom is way more valuable. Wisdom about creation is not even found within creation. The deep says, it's not in me. The sea says, it's not in us. There's no wisdom here. He speaks how rare it is. It's rare. Wisdom is so precious. And God is the only one who has true wisdom. Let's look at verses 23 through 28. Job says, God understands its way. He knows its place. For he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he imparted weight to the wind and meted out the waters by measure, when he set a limit for the rain and a course for the thunderbolt. And he saw it and he declared it, and he established it and also searched it out. And to man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. God understands its way. He knows its place. Job knew the answer to his own question. He knew that God understood wisdom and its source. Only God possesses this kind of wisdom. The things that perplex us, they don't perplex God. The mysteries which surround us are no mysteries to God. Having shown God as the source of wisdom, Job now makes application to man. Man must look to God for wisdom. Man may share only knowledge and reveal the mind of God, but God is the source of it. Job says, when he imparted weight to the wind, when he meted out the waters by measure, when he set a limit for the rain and a course for the thunderbolt, I couldn't get it out. He establishes the weight for the wind. I love this phrase. You think about a couple of things that come to my mind with this phrase. First of all, you think about the pressure. What is that called? The barometric pressure. Or even the establishment of the weight of the wind. I don't know the strength of the wind. God is in control of how powerful that wind can be. He meted out the waters by measure. I think about how he divided out the waters, you know. God's the one that did this. When he set the limit for the rain, you know, when we see it raining, we think, I wonder how much rain we're going to get. Well, God knows. We measure it, but God's the one that sets the limit or the law for the rain. God makes the path for the thunderbolt. Anybody ever, you think you can, no, we can't really control that. The natural thunderbolt is not controlled. Well, the same God who masters the natural world has the riches of wisdom at His disposal. He has demonstrated His own wisdom and power through the design of the natural world. Behold, the fear of the Lord. That is wisdom, is what Job says. And to depart from evil is understanding. Job concluded this great speech by coming back to the touchstone of revelation, the foundation of it all. True wisdom comes from God, and it's found by being in a right relationship to Him. It's the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord. Wisdom is shown by life that departs from evil. And Job understood what the psalmist later on would say. In Psalm 111 and verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You want to be wise? You fear God. It's repeated through the Proverbs, and true wisdom can only be gained through God. Human effort, our energy, our ingenuity, like those rare and precious metals of the earth, it's worthless. Then the fear of the Lord, that's what is essential to obtaining true wisdom. It comes from God's revelation. That right relationship with Him is the key to wisdom. Only God possesses the true wisdom. That's what His message is. Put that through there. Only God possesses the true wisdom. What is understood here but left unsaid is that God knows the mystery of Job's life. God knows it. God understands why Job is suffering the way that he is suffering. And Job is hoping that God will reveal it to him. When we know that at the end of the story, even though Job is restored with everything that he had lost, he still does not understand by the end of it why those things happened to him. And so this is, in a sense, Job's final argument to his friends. God will reveal the truth concerning what I've suffered through, what I've been hurting with. All right, we'll conclude right there and pick up next week with chapter 30. Or chapter 29.